us about you.
Well, I was born December 7, 1967 in Rotterdam, and was actually one of the few snowy days in Holland. Was born and raised there, came to America when I was 20 years old, was married to an American GI, came to this country. Loved America. I mean, I loved it ever since I was a little child. I got bad grades in my English class because I spoke too American, but that I did that on purpose. I was trying to be American. Loved Dallas and Dynasty and the Cosby Show and everything, and landed in Boston, Massachusetts. Been all over the country. Became a flight attendant. Went to college here in America as well. Became a flight attendant for United Airlines for 10 years. Ended up divorced and remarried. Have two children, Matthew, who's almost 25 years old, and Angelina, who's 10 years old. Married to a wonderful man, Cherie Rineker. And I have been interested in holistic health ever since 2004. Started working, volunteering at the ARE, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, Edgar Casey. Don't know how many people are familiar with that, but went to the Casey Riley School of Massotherapy, where I learned massage therapy, reflexology, colon hydrotherapy, and worked as a massage therapist, colon hydrotherapist. Really loved my work. And then ended up at the Tree of Life in Patagonia as a spa supervisor, doing all that. Throughout the 10 years that I was a massage therapist, I kept going to school. Went to school at Clayton College for Natural Health to get my bachelor's in neuropathy for education, so I could teach people about healthy living, meditation, spirituality, yoga. All those things have been very important in my life. And yeah, now I'm here in Boulder, which is a very light-minded place. Don't consider myself of any religion, but more embracing of love in the world. And so, as Elton John said, love is my religion. And, or I don't know if it was Elton John, but yeah, love is my religion, and just believe that this world can be a much better, gentler place if we were all a little kinder with ourselves and with others.
Great. Hold on a sec. We're going to do a little bit here. And I'm just going to ask you if you could answer one thing. Just say your name and where you live, and if you want to say your age, like just sort of, you know, that.
Sure.
And your mother, wife, you know.
Oh, yeah.
That piece too.
Okay.
Just tiny.
So my name is Cherie Rineker. I'm going to be 48 years old next month. I live in Lake Jackson, Texas, with my husband and my daughter. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I work at a little health food store. And but mostly I consider myself a spiritual, I don't want to say teacher, a spiritual student, because I'm just forever searching for inner peace and love and seeing the good in the world and in people.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, you have been diagnosed with something. Can you tell us what that is?
So I was diagnosed 3 years ago with multiple myeloma, which is a bone cancer. Something to do with the plasma cells being out of control, pushing out all the healthy blood cells. So I was extremely anemic, and multiple myeloma also causes lesions in the bones, which are holes. And when your bones are being eaten up, that's very painful. I have Swiss cheese for bones, I always say, from my skull to my pelvis, my ribs, my spine. I have 4 fractures on my spine, broken ribs, and after 6 months of being misdiagnosed, they finally found out that it was multiple myeloma. It's an incurable cancer. They are coming up with more and more medicine to extend life, but for somebody like me who was, I was found out in stage 3, which is the latest stage, and it was very advanced, and it's been aggressive because it doesn't really, the chemo and the stem cell transplants and the radiation I've gone through and stuff hasn't really resulted in a complete remission. So for 3 years I've had to be nonstop on chemo and other things. So that's what multiple myeloma is. It's a difficult cancer. It's a very painful cancer to have.
Thank you. And now you're in Colorado. What's happening here for you, and how you're responding?
Yeah, so in the summer of 2015, my cancer actually started to creep up again, and I had been looking into cannabis a lot. I saw a lot of testimonials online. When you have cancer, you'll do anything. You get so much advice, and you're researching all the time. And cannabis started to get in the news more and more, and it was just something that I intuitively really felt like that might be something, because one of the nurses at MD Anderson had basically told me one day, it's either the chemo or the cancer that's going to kill you. And being a mother of a young child, that was not a good enough answer for me. I don't want to be on chemo for the rest of my life. I know slowly my body will deteriorate from that, and I didn't want to die from the cancer. So did a lot of research about it, and decided to go to Colorado. Actually was in the local newspaper in Lake Jackson. They did a piece of me over 3 days, because I was going to have to leave my family, because the cannabis is illegal in the state of Texas, even medicinal. And so it was a pretty big story that I was going to have to leave my family, my comforts. My daughter was going to have to do without me, but I rather went looking for an answer to see if I could bring my cancer remission that way. So came to Colorado and started doing the cannabis. Actually, I started doing some CBD first from Bluebell Botanical. Started doing that, and within a week my white blood cells went into the normal, which they hadn't been normal for ever since the stem cell transplant a year and a half prior. And then the following week my platelets that hadn't been able to reach 100 went up to 112, I think, for the first time also since my stem cell transplant, minding you that after transplant your numbers are at 0. So that was a really good sign. And then when I came here, I was trying to do the pretty famous Rick Simpson oil now, which is very high in THC. And a lot of people said if you do that, you take a grain of that a day for 60 days, then people were cured of their cancer. I unfortunately soon found out that I'm a lightweight, and I wasn't able to handle the gram. But even with just taking a couple of drops of it, my neuropathy went away right away. So I am on about 5 medicines right now for the side effects of my cancer, my chemo. Neuropathy is a side effect from the chemo. That went away using the CBD and the THC. The pain that I always had in my bones and in my ribs, that's been gone the whole time I've been in Colorado. I've been nauseous for 3 years. I've had a horrible appetite, and I started getting an appetite to the point where I was actually looking forward to food. And then, let me see what else, my sleeping improved. And just the overall sense of well-being. I've always, in the last 3 years, been struggling with anxiety and depression, because when you have cancer, it's incurable. It's kind of depressing. So those things have all been working. I went back home to visit my family a couple times, couldn't take the THC with me, and within days I would have to get back on the gabapentin for my neuropathy and oxycodone for my pain. So it really has shown to me that when I'm on it, I feel better than when I'm not.
What's neuropathy?
Neuropathy is what a lot of people get that have diabetes. It's a tingling in your, a sense of loss of feeling, a burning sensation, tingling sensation that you get because the nerves get damaged. And pretty much all chemotherapies for multiple myeloma as a side effect have neuropathy. So that can be pretty severe.
So you've just listed all these different things that you're battling, and yet to look at you, you look beautiful and you're cheerful, you smile. So how do you attribute where you are to?
Well, when you fall really, really deep and you don't have any further to fall, And you realize in that moment that you have to either get up or there's no point in going on. When you reach that low and you manage to bring yourself back up, then life is just an incredible gift. When I was first diagnosed with cancer, I went really, really low. Not only did I get diagnosed, but when I went on to chemotherapy, I lost my period, so I went into menopause instantly. And so that kind of shakes up the body. Also, the steroids have a lot of side effects. It makes people angry. In my case, it made me so depressed that I started having suicidal fantasies. And, I was really, really in bad shape. I could not function. From the moment that I woke up to the moment I went to bed, death, dying, suffering was on my mind. It was absolutely horrible. And when I got through the first stem cell transplant, which I feared so bad, and it turned out not to be as bad as I thought, that's when, and I really saw the numbers, my cancer numbers drop after that. That's when hope became part of my life again. And that's when I saw, somewhat of a future and gave my life purpose. I've had a lot of purpose in being able to help other people that are in the same situation as me. I work at a little health food store, and a lot of people are diagnosed with cancer. They come in, and so I saw that I became a role model with my healthy looking and my good attitude, to the point that people said I was the inspiration to them, and that kind of brought me to a place where I felt I want to share my secret, whatever the spiritual work that went ahead of the cancer diagnosis about 15 years. I wanted to share that in a book, and I share that with people when they come to my house, to my store, that you can actually live a really wonderful life, not only with cancer, terminal cancer diagnosis, but also being on chemotherapy. And that attitude is more than half the battle. That when you keep your attitude good, the cancer loses, even if it ends up taking you.
Fix your hair, that was really good. Give you the ability to speak without this being in your eyes.
Yeah, I'm not feeling it, so it feels okay.
Good. So, the reason... Do you want some water?
No, I thought I had a sniffy.
You might have said everything that needs to be said, but just to give you a place of, what do you think, why are you writing a book? Why tell your story?
The reason I want to write a book, I've lived a very difficult life. I've made some difficult decisions in my life, and some wrong mistakes, people would call it. But the kind of person I've always been since I was a little girl was to be willing to learn from my mistakes. I never minded people telling me if I did something wrong, because to me, even I remember at 6, 7, 8, I wanted to hear it so I could do it better the next time. So, with everything that happened in my life, I could have been the person that would have ended up, drug addict, suicidal, on a lot of medicines, addictions and stuff. But instead, I have chosen to take all my life lessons to grow and learn from it spiritually. And in doing so, when I have spoken to other people in my situation, I always seem to give them a lot of hope, because I always tell people I'm not special. There's nothing about me that's any better than there is about you. So I always told people, if I could do this, if I could get control over my eating disorder, or if I could get control over my my victimhood of my childhood and stuff, if I can overcome these things, then I believe anybody can. You just need to have a really strong willingness. It does take a lot of work, but if this is something that you want to do, I believe anybody can accomplish that. And where I feel I'm in my head and in my body today, I really believe that if the world thought more the way that I live, it would be a much kinder and gentler world. We wouldn't be so busy pointing fingers at each other, judging each other, because we'd be too busy trying to make sure that we would be the best that we could be. And so I hope that this book will read a lot of people that just need some hope in whatever they're going through. I want to be an inspiration to the world. And I think that my story, even prior to being diagnosed with cancer, would have touched a lot of people. But, cancer is the one biggie that we're all so very afraid of. And having lived in it for 3 years, it's kind of become my new normal. And I want to let people know that even when you have something that bad happen to you, that it's not the end of the world or your life, and that you can live a really good life. And so it's a book of inspiration, really.
Wonderful.
Good.
How's that?
I was good. I was thinking maybe if you wanted, you could say something about your childhood, if you wanted to. Because you said, my story, and I don't know.
Okay.
Well, I heard you guys talking, but I, as an audience, wouldn't know, what you're referring to.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Or just, a brief overview of, this is... Because you talked about, Mom, that was a good question of, you, look amazing. How could you be sick? You look great. And then, being in such an awful place and then coming here. So...
Right.
I don't know, kind of just, your upbringing.
I'm trying to think, which part... Because there's so many particular nasty stories that it's definitely not going to make my parents look good or my siblings or anything. So it's I'm trying to... It's been hard for me. I think in the book I'm going to have to just kind of bash my family because it's part of saying, see, I overcame this, But what I could say is, so my mother was from Argentina. My father was my father was Dutch. And my mother moved to Holland and never felt at home there. My father was an old-fashioned guy who believed he brought home the bacon, and my mom took care of the 5 children, who she didn't enjoy that job. She felt very lonely. She cut herself off from the world more. It wasn't the people around her. Looking back, it was really my mother just thinking that the world didn't like her, judged her, discriminated her for her religion. She was a Christian Scientist, probably the only young Christian Scientist in Holland. And she put a lot of her misery on her children. So it just wasn't a joyful house. We were blamed for her miseries, We wish you weren't born, you're a biological mistake, you kids are parasites. We got to hear a lot of that. And I think because she was afraid of losing control over us, she was crazy strict. She was Argentinian strict in a Dutch country, which is very, very open-minded, and kids are raised much less strict. So we really didn't fit in with the kids. And my mom would give us punishments, if we spoke back to her as a teenager, the punishment was that we wouldn't be allowed to wash our hair for a week. So we walked around to school. We had to go to a private school. Everybody wore certain clothes. My mom didn't want to spend the money on the clothes that the rest of the kids wore, and we had greasy hair. For some reason, my mom believed that we didn't have to brush our teeth. So we had, yellow-coated teeth, and she just had all these very weird reasons, very weird rules. And one of my very painful childhood memories that stuck with me for a long time was that I had an incredible overbite, was teased relentlessly by children, and so I wanted braces. It wasn't that my parents couldn't afford it, but my mother, being a Christian Scientist, told me, close your mouth, pray to God, and your lips will be God's braces and your teeth will go back. Well, obviously with a 13-millimeter overbite, that didn't happen. And my father finally convinced her to allow me a retainer. My uncle was a dentist. I was the most loyal retainer wearer. He was amazed how quick my teeth went back. But because they went back so quick, the roots were still in the place. And he said, you need to keep wearing this at night. You need to wean yourself off it. And so I'd worn them for about a year. Was so happy, wasn't teased anymore. And I was about 14 years old. And one night my mother opens the door to my bedroom, turned on the light, and said, let me see your mouth. And I was wearing my retainer. And she goes, you're addicted to that thing. Give it to me. You're done with it. And within a year, my teeth basically went back to where they were. And I never understood, even to this day as a grown-up, why something that caused nobody any harm but only benefited my self-esteem, why my mother would do something. It just seemed evil and mean to me. And so maybe to the average person hearing this, if you've never had an overbite, you've never been bullied or teased, that sounds like, even to me at my age now, it's like, it's the big deal. But when you're in that age, and we already didn't fit in on so many levels, and then something like that, and then with the greasy hair, and just the punishments never fit the crime and stuff. It was just, it was a mentally abusive. Also, my mother really worked the sisters against each other, spoke bad, just set us up against each other. And one of my sisters and I were the closest together, yet my mother wouldn't allow us to be in the same room chatting because she was afraid that we'd talk bad about her. So there was a lot of negativity and fear. Even though her words spoke of everything spiritually that I have learned to be true, like the Course in Miracles, all those things. She read all those books, but there was absolutely no application of it. So she was a very self-righteous woman with her words, this is how we need to live, but in her actions she was exactly the opposite. And so when I became a mother, I definitely learned through her mistake to make sure that I will only teach my daughter through example. If I cannot do it myself, how can I expect my daughter to do something? So in that, I'm actually grateful, looking back with the gift of a tough childhood, because I again chose to turn it into something good. But while I was in it, it was really, really tough.
That was really good. That was a very good example.
Oh, thank you.
So, I want to ask you another question if I can, because I think it's a kind of dramatic moment in your life. Will you tell us about the night you decided to run away?
Yeah. So I ran away when I was 17 and a half in the summer, I don't know, 1988 I think it was, or 86, somewhere around there. But I had a boyfriend, his name was Peter, and we were allowed to go out, which didn't happen a lot, but and in Holland, discos for even the youth in Holland, they usually would start at about 11 o'clock and go on to 3, 4. That's just the way it was. And if we were allowed to go out, usually we had to be home at 11:30 or 12, which meant there were 2 other people in the disco just arrived and we'd have to go. But anyways, I was allowed to go out, so I was excited, and of course we stayed a little bit too long. And because I knew of my parents' strictness, I called them from a phone, and it was about 11:45, and I said we were going to be a little bit late. And my father just said, "Come home now," and hung up the phone. So I knew I was going to be in trouble. We raced home. We went faster on that 30-minute bike ride than I'd ever gone. We made it. I think I got home at like 12:10. Went up to the back door, which was right next to my parents' bedroom, to knock on the door. They let me in, and I figured I was going to get it, but my parents just said go to bed. I had asked Peter to wait outside because I figured, in case my parents were going to be unreasonable. I had gotten to that age where I just wasn't liking what was going on in the house anymore. I'd seen too many examples with my other siblings. So he was waiting by the road. I was excited. They said, just go to bed. So I went back out through that back door to tell him it was okay. And when I came back, they had locked the door behind me. Their bedroom was right next to this door. So I knocked on the door, and I knocked louder, and they chose not to open the door. So I then realized they're punishing me, and they're going to let me stay the night outside by myself. I was mad. I ran to the street and yelled after Peter and jumped on the back of his bicycle. And I said, I'm done. I'm running away. We went to his house, 30-minute ride again on the bicycle. And his parents, of course, he was 17 years old, I think. His parents said, no, you're not staying here. So called my parents. My father said, get a taxi, come home. I came home. They said, go to bed. The next morning they had a meeting with me. I remember where it was, sitting outside, and they said, it was at the beginning of the summer, They said, you are not to speak to your boyfriend. You cannot call him. He cannot come visit. You are not allowed to leave the house for the entire summer. You stay inside the house. You help mom with your chores, and that's going to be your summer. I was 17 and a half, and for the first time in my life, I said, no, this just isn't right. They saw that I was defiant, so they had a close eye on me. They wouldn't let me go to bed before they went to bed because they thought I might sneak out. So my father would throw me back in the chair, tell me to sit, or he would tie me up. Never had to, but you know, it was that uncomfortable. And a couple days later, my father went to work. The car was underneath the house in the garage. And in that moment, I decided that I was going to leave for the day. And I just had a white sweater on, jeans, and some slippers or something. I ran downstairs, grabbed my bike, all shaky, and was a long garageway, ran outside with my mother running behind me, telling me to come back, and I left. And went to hang out with a cook that worked at the restaurant that I worked at. And it was about 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, and I knew I had to come home and face the music. And because the music was always so strict, and in this case, I couldn't even imagine, because I'd really never broken my parents' laws. You know, I was a very good, obedient child, but I figured if I was grounded for the summer over being late 10 minutes, I was going to be grounded till I was 30. And so that day I decided I'm not coming home. And even though over the next few days I wanted to go home, and my parents knew where I was working, but they never came looking for me. And so that really showed me they didn't care, they weren't trying. My sister had ran away many times from home. My parents always chased after her with the cops and themselves, but they didn't come looking for me. And so that started out my life. 17 and a half, boom. I left home, really not intending to be gone forever. I wasn't done with school yet at the time. Left all my friends and everything, and lived on the streets for the next 6 months until I met my first husband. So that was a really difficult part in my life.
And your sisters ran away too, it sounds like.
My oldest sister ran away from home since she was 12. I think because my father was such a workaholic, and us girls, especially the 3 older ones, didn't get the time and attention we needed from him. He never wanted us around, really. It was like he would get up after we went to school, and he wanted us in bed when he came home. And I think the 3 oldest sisters particularly, we always liked older men. It's the typical, you know, girl that's looking for a daddy role model. And then you confuse love for sex. You know, you don't know what, you know, men were interested in me. I thought that meant they loved me, because daddy really didn't show a lot of interest in me. But it was really sex they were interested in, as I found out later. But yeah, my sister started running away at 12. She was a little bit more of an extreme case, I think, she wanted things at 11 and 12 that I certainly hope my daughter is not going to want at such an early age. And then my other sister had a lot of issues with my mom. And my mother, when she turned 18, she just couldn't handle my sister anymore. She kicked her out of the house. And so when I started, I was always my mom's confidant. Since I was 9, I remember my mother always sitting with me, and I had to swear to her and promise to her that I wouldn't turn out like my other 2 siblings. And I loved my mother so much. I would actually be angry at my grandmother because my mom didn't like my grandmother. I didn't like my siblings very much because they caused my mom so much pain. And so I was my mom's psychiatrist in a sense from a very early age. And I think the reason that the relationship between me and my mom is most broken to this day is because I think in her heart I'm the one who betrayed her. She thought she had somebody in me that wasn't going to disappoint her. But it was really more that my mom didn't know how to handle teenagers, because none of us, looking back and looking at kids today, we weren't drug addicts. We didn't drink alcohol. My oldest sister smoked. I think that was it. We were decent in school and stuff. You know, we were polite, we behaved. But if you didn't agree with everything that my mom said, and a lot of it was a little strange often, then we were disrespectful and we would be punished for that. And so when I realized that I was disappointing my mother the way my sisters had disappointed it, and haven't been her confidant, I knew what was coming. I knew how she was now talking about me to others. And I didn't want to become the next one. And that's why, because of the examples of my older siblings, I said, apparently I've now become the bad child as well, and I don't want to be there. And that's why I made that decision to run away. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty traumatic. Took me a long time to get over. Took me till my 40s. I've really only been healing from this, in the last years. And for some reason, cancer has helped. Cancer puts life in a completely different perspective. All of a sudden, your little problems seem so... And a lot of people will tell me, like, I can't complain, or when I have a toothache, then I think about you, Cherie. And I always want to tell them, no, don't take away your own... Your problems are valid to you. I don't expect the whole world to go like, well, we have no right to complain because look at Cherie, she's got cancer, look how she's dealing with it, But the choice is, do you want to make things a problem, or do you want to see if you can maybe turn it into a lesson or something that is not as serious? And that's what I've learned to do. That's what cancer taught me, that, most problems in life really aren't big problems, But it all comes down when you also think you're so close to dying. One thing that I realized, we all want to look good, we all want nice things and stuff, but when you're close to dying, you realize the only thing that matters is how many people do you love and how many people love you. That is it. You don't think about how nice my house looks, or how cool my car is and stuff. None of that matters. And that was that's a lesson that would be good for a lot of people to know, that truly doesn't matter when it comes down to it. You can't take any of it with you anyway, so. But you can take love with you. I really believe that. I believe when we die, whatever our energy is at that time is what we bring with us. So I think if you have lived a very angry life, you take that anger in energy with you. If you've lived a very joyful life, you bring joy with you. Loving, hate, you take the hate with you. So I think it's really important for us to think what's going on with our energy, what we'll take with us. So that's my belief system. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but it works for me.
That seems like plenty.
That's good. Yeah.